So my own philosophy, which took a long time to live, is that when you stand up for something, the sentiment is you not only want to save that animal or that valley or that giant tree or that island for the sake of the ecosystem there, you want to save it for all future generations of people, our children and our grandchildren. My name is Wayne McCrory. I'm 78 years old. I have lived in British Columbia all my life. I grew up in this beautiful province. I'm a registered professional biologist with about 80 published reports and scientific papers under my name. I'm also a conservationist and stand up for wilderness and grizzly bears and wild animals and frogs and that sort of thing. So I sort of have two sides to myself. So when I got out of university with my honors degree in zoology and went to work for the Canadian Wildlife Service, they had just started clear cutting the valley I grew up in, which is a beautiful valley called the Slocan Valley in our inland temperate rainforest. And we were all appalled, but didn't know what to do at the time. The word environmentalist didn't exist then. We knew about conservation, but we didn't know how bad clear cutting was for animals and grizzly bears and so on. So we realized that the mountains across from where I lived, the Valhalla range, was also laid out for logging and stuff. So we formed a little committee called the Valhalla Committee and eventually formed a society and started a campaign to save the Valhalla range. That turned out to be a lesson in BC politics, a lesson in environmental issues, a lesson in how much of a stranglehold the forest industry had on our elected governments, and a lesson in community relationships, how to get support in a small community who had never been exposed to these kind of logging wilderness battles before. It took us 8 years, and we were largely successful. We learned a lot of hard lessons. Some of our colleagues were beat up by loggers. My late sister Colleen had a hate campaign that was fed by the newspaper called the Redneck News, produced in Haida Gwaii, because we were also involved with the South Moresby campaign. But eventually we were successful. The clear cutting in BC has been fought by thousands of environmentalists and citizens in BC. There have been huge blockades in Clayoquot Sound, in the Kootenays. I myself was arrested fighting clear cutting. My late sister Colleen, an award-winning environmentalist, was arrested, but it still carries on. And it carries on because every elected government we have in this province doesn't listen to the people. It doesn't listen to the science. It doesn't listen to what the clear cuts are doing to the ecosystems. It just listens to the jobs and economics. And that has to change, that attitude in our politicians. They need to stop betraying the public trust. They were elected to public office to represent the people. That's a very challenging question, because when I started as an activist and a scientist and environmentalist, we didn't know anything about global warming and carbon emissions. Now we not only have overpopulation, overconsumption, loss of biodiversity in British Columbia. Since I started, we have, despite many good conservation measures, we have over 1,000 endangered species. We've lost over half of the Great Bear ancient rainforest to clear-cut logging. And so we're in a global crisis of proportions that people haven't seen before. The good thing about it is we have lots of science. We have thousands and thousands of people who've stood up for animals and the environment. We have biologists, we have politicians, different people, but it's not enough. Many of us, myself included, grew up with almost the luxury of employment, wealth, homes, vehicles. You could go out and make money and own a home that my grandparents could never own, coming from impoverished Ireland. So we live in a very wealthy society, but we're pillaging the planet to support that economic support system for all of the wonderful lifestyle we have. And we need to slow down and stop over-consuming. We need to electrify our carbon-producing vehicles. We need to fast-track everything, because it's not just a question of saving more old growth, or saving this salmon run, or saving this turtle pond. It's a question now of saving the planet from the fate of global warming and climate change, which is going to not only, and already is, affecting all of humanity, but will have profound consequences for our children and our grandchildren. They will pay the price for our intransigence, our greed, our lack of speaking up to change things, our lack of giving something back. And so, even though we have now very powerful tools and very powerful awareness of what needs to be done, we need our youth, we need everybody to speak up and do more, leave a piece of something, whether it's saving a turtle or a little pond or a big tree or an island or a whole wilderness valley. Instead of just taking from the earth, taking from what our grandparents built, taking just from the wealth that comes from the natural resources, give something back, give something of yourself, so that you contribute to restoring the planet to the healthy place it used to be. And anybody can do it. It's quite simple. You just have to give up a little bit of your time. You have to give up some of your money to support this. You have to speak up, which a lot of people don't like to do. Some people have to become an activist and have your neighbors hate you, or people threaten you because of it. Just look at Greta Thunberg, and she's a little girl who decided to speak up. And look at the waves she's made in the planet. Look at David Suzuki, who grew up as an interred Japanese boy in the valley I grew up in before I grew up there, who was oppressed by society such that he and his dad couldn't even legally go trout fishing in the Valhalla range because it was against the law. Look what his speaking up has done. So that's what people need to do. They need to stand up. Grizzly bear is symbolic to me of everything you take that's wild and condense it into a big hairy animal that's so well adapted to Mother Earth that it prefers to sleep the winter away than try and live out in the cold like we do. So, and it's also very slow to reproduce, but it has a spirit. All animals have spirits and beings, and not only every species has a different feeling about it, but even individual bears, once you get to know them, have a different feeling about them. But when you look into their eyes, you see the wilderness, you see the ecosystem, you see things that we ourselves, a relationship everybody yearns to have with nature, that the bear is so at home in everything and so wild. It sort of brings the beauty of the forest out through its eyes, and the beauty of the salmon and the health of the planet I see in their eyes. When you see a healthy bear in a natural ecosystem, you know that all is well with the earth. They've also taught us that we can't go and shoot and trap and hunt and poison animals like the grizzly bears to make way for our love of beef, for the cattle industry. They're very fragile. They may look huge, and the mother grizzlies are great mothers, but they're the slowest reproducing animal in North America. So they're very vulnerable to poaching, control kills, clear-cut logging, destroys their winter dens and habitat, all kinds of things. So basically, British Columbia is one of the strongholds of the grizzly bear in North America, which used to range all the way to Ontario. So we've lost the grizzly of the hardwoods in Ontario. We've lost the plains grizzly. We've lost the Mexican grizzly. The grizzly used to go down into Mexico. They called it Don Oso, Sir Bear. And so Don Oso is gone. And when I go visit the canyons in Arizona and the deep hidden canyons of Mexico where I once worked, you see the paintings the indigenous people left their 5 toes and their long claws on the canyon walls, and that's all that left of them. But if you listen, you can hear the ghosts of the grizzly padding along through the canyon looking for its lost home. Those bears, our spirit is still out there, and that they're telling us we want our home back. We want you to bring us back, bring our ancestors back, bring bears down and put us back on the land because our spirit belongs here. And when we're gone, something is gone from the wilderness.